Live from beyond the Beltway, this is Bruce DuMont with our weekly analysis of national politics, featuring occasional injections of rumor and innuendo, all offered up by a panel of political insiders, pundits, power brokers, public servants, professors, and most importantly, plain-speaking Americans from coast to coast. Tonight featuring commentary by conservative commentator Mark Vargas and Democratic activist Patrick Hanley. A little bit later on the program, we'll be joined by attorney Judith Sherwin, and our program coming to you tonight from the studios of AM 560. The Answer here in beautiful Elk Grove Village, Illinois. Nice to have you with us. Phone lines open for the full 2 hours, 1-800-723-8289. That's 1-800-723-8289 on this Christmas week. Nice to have you with us. And I can make a prediction now that based on this morning's appearance on Fox News Sunday by Joe Manchin, he will not be invited to the White House Christmas party if there's going to be one, because he stuck it to the president. There's already the White House has already spent most of the day today trashing Joe Manchin and saying that he backed away from promises that had been made directly to the president of the United States this past week. It'll be a continuing story for the next several days. But clearly, Joe Manchin has done what everyone suspected that he was probably going to do at the end. He got his way, and a lot of Democrats are really ticked off at Joe Manchin tonight. Mark Vargas, I want to begin with you because you're sort of our Republican operative tonight. Is obviously this is a big win for Republicans. Do they have to do something on their own by themselves in 2022, or can they continue to just sort of wait on the sidelines and let the Democratic firing squad continue?
Well, first of all, Bruce, thanks for having me on. And that's a great question. And, I've served under 2 presidential administrations, and I was an advisor to a third, both Republicans and Democrats. Let me just say this from the very beginning. I don't wish for a president's legislative agenda to go down in flames, because I think it hurts everybody. I may not necessarily agree with what's all in the legislation, but some of it I think is good. But this is a bad day for the Biden administration. His entire legislative agenda has gone up in flames. He campaigned on normalcy is coming back and his expertise in the Senate. But I think this is going to be huge for Republicans going into the midterm elections. Democrats obviously are going to be limping into the midterms for a variety of reasons, notwithstanding the legislative failures that they control both House and
But
Senate.
you don't think Republicans have to do much of a positive nature? They can just kind of warm their hands as they watch the Democratic bonfire.
Yeah, this was a gift. This was a gift.
Patrick Hanley, you're the Democrat. You were nodding a little bit with what Mark had to say. Is this a really bad day for Joe Biden?
Well, first I'd just say that, for the Republicans to do something positive ever would be a big surprise. Yeah, it's a bad day. It's a bad day for the president. But I've got to say, this isn't his entire legislative agenda. Of course, he passed $1.2 trillion in decades-long needed infrastructure spending, which is going to start going out the door this coming year. He tapped Mitch Landrieu, the very successful mayor of New Orleans, to lead that effort. So I'm excited to see investments in roads, bridges, airports. And then
quick question, should there have been a longer time when the Biden administration could just sort of bask in the glow of all these millions, tens of millions going out? In other words, did they move to the other point of the debate too quickly, and they lost the glow?
Well, let's remember that we weren't going to get the infrastructure plan without the support of the Progressive Caucus. That was a key voting bloc that got us across the finish line. And so these 2 bills needed to be negotiated in tandem. One came across and the other still hasn't. That said, I think wrapped up in the Build Back Better plan are a number of incredibly popular policies that are now on the ballot. And so, this is a setback for the president. But frankly, if we can run on issues like lowering drug prices, like investing in climate-resilient policies, in electric vehicles, these are the sorts of things that voters will respond to in the midterms.
Mark, do you think there are things in Build Back Better that are popular, even with a lot of Republicans and independents?
It's a good question, but I think at the end of the day, what's really distracting the country is the pandemic. I mean, it doesn't matter what's inside the Build Back Better. The pandemic is a gigantic distraction. What's happening from a foreign policy perspective across the globe, the threats with Russia and China, what's happening in Afghanistan, that's a major distraction because of the threats that are posed. So I think that at the end of the day, while there could be some things that are beneficial for all and build back better, I think at the end of the day, there are just so many distractions going on. And the fact that you've got this battle between the president's and vice president's office and these terrible poll numbers, his poll numbers and her poll numbers.
Yeah, I hear you, but I think what I would love to hear from our listeners and what I hear on the doors when I go knocking is the price of healthcare, is the opioid crisis, is public safety, or is prices, inflation. These are the things that are top of mind, not necessarily foreign policy and not necessarily Washington, D.C.
How do they bring that up? I mean, you say you talk to people, door to door or at cocktail party. And how do they bring up the subject of inflation?
Oh, everybody's talking about it, I think. Everybody
what are
talks
they saying about it?
Yeah, they're saying,
Are they blaming Biden for it?
I haven't heard a lot of that, but I am a Democrat, and so people could be being polite. The reality is the economy is going through a massive dislocation. There was mismatched supply and demand from the last year and a half of an unprecedented pandemic, and that's biting us in the behind right now. A lot of the infrastructure plan spending, though, will go directly to that. When we spend on ports, when we spend on airports, that's going to make our economy function more smoothly.
You agree with that, Mark?
The issue at the ports, and I just wrote a national op-ed in Newsmax. I have my own column on newsmax.com called The Potomac Perspective. And what the real issue at the ports is outdated technology. We haven't, and that's not necessarily a federal government issue. That's a local issue. These ports are too small. The ports are small, outdated. The ships are getting bigger and bigger with more containers. It's a perfect storm with the pandemic and a worker shortage. And so you've got this giant holding pattern. I was in Long Beach not too long ago, and I counted from the air as I took off from LAX, 60 cargo ships just hovering along the coast, anchored, waiting to be unloaded. And so, again, this is not a federal government issue. This is a local issue.
Well, what's nice is that it's become a federal issue, and this is what Democrats deliver. We are rebuilding decades-old infrastructure. We're spending in critical infrastructure, and that's going to improve the national economy. This is what Democrats do when we're in power.
But the irony is that restaurants and small businesses can't even find workers. I can't tell you how many small businesses cannot open. Under the Democratic economy, we still can't get people to work.
Under the COVID
and
economy.
I think that's
the COVID economy.
which is owned now by the Democratic Party, who control both Congress and the White House. Talk to all these small business owners, not just here in Illinois, but across the country. They cannot reopen their businesses. They cannot come out to full capacity yet because there is a worker shortage.
Oh, and don't worry.
And
no,
why is there, Patrick, you first, why is there a you acknowledge there's a worker shortage, right? Why?
Yeah. Well, there's three major things that are going into the worker shortage. First, folks have retired early. Millions of Americans have decided to end their careers at 60 or 63 rather than 65 or later. So they're moving out of the workforce. Second, under Trump's disastrous policies around immigration have prevented the flow of folks into this country. Then the pandemic made that worse. Folks haven't been coming into the country. So we have missed out on a crucial part of our workforce, which is immigrants. And on the third side is what we're calling the Great Resignation, right?
When we come back, I want to hear about the point about the immigrants coming to the country and how they have hurt what's going on. I want to get Mark's response to that. 1-800-723-8289 is the phone number. I'm Bruce DuMont from coast to coast and border to border and around the world at BeyondTheBeltway.com. Back shortly.
Oh, hello. These days, I'm often quoted as saying, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. People forget that I was the first technology president, using the telegraph, T-mails as I like to call them, to communicate with my generals. Well, today, we are fighting a cybersecurity war, and our best defense is for folks to follow some of these tips when they're online. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Hover your cursor over links to determine the true web address. Look for misspellings and poor grammar, which are warning signs of fraud. Be suspicious of emails requesting urgent action, and never give away sensitive personal information. With malware for none, with cyber protection for all. This is your humble servant, Abraham Lincoln.
Type 2 diabetes can have a big impact on your life, but how can it be prevented? Well, the first step is knowing if you have prediabetes, a serious medical condition that puts you at high risk for type 2 diabetes. 1 in 3 American adults has prediabetes, but more than 80% don't know they have it. The good news is, prediabetes can be reversed, and for many people, healthy changes in their daily routine can make a big difference. Take the 1-minute risk test today at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Bruce DuMont back. We continue with Beyond the Beltway. Thanks for joining us tonight, wherever you're listening from coast to coast and border to border. Before the break, Patrick had made a point about illegal immigration and how that is causing some of the problem. Legal immigration. That a lot of people who would like to come to the United States are not coming to the United States. And so that's leading to those who are looking for jobs, or people who need jobs. Your interpretation of that same issue, Mark?
First of all, I'm an American of Mexican descent.
Okay.
I remain an informal advisor to the former president of Mexico, Vicente Fox. So this border issue is critically important. No question. I'll concede the fact that there is a issue with immigration in the process. That needs to be fixed, and Republicans and Democrats have been debating about this issue for decades, and no one's been able to really have real substantive reforming of the system. That being said, what's happening today on our border is I understand national security. I was in Baghdad 14 times as a civilian in combat when I worked for the Secretary of Defense. I know national security threats. What's happening at the border is a national security threat. The cartels are controlling the border, and it's a shame that President Biden and Vice President Harris have failed to really acknowledge this issue and the border crossings. When Jay Johnson was Secretary of Homeland Security under President Obama, he said just 1,000 illegals crossing our border is a bad day. Today, we have over 7,000 illegals crossing our border. They're holding them hostage for ransom money. There's women and children are being abused at their border. And so I think it's critical, not just from a national security perspective, but for our country's security, that we really secure this border, because this is an issue. So what's the
answer? What is the answer? Again, because you had some bigwig friends in the Trump administration. That was one of his key issues. I mean, did he solve the border crisis?
Well, we had less border crossings under President Trump than we did now. And in fact, you have the president of Mexico, and in Central America, the president saying that Biden has created this idea of open border policy where you've got people crossing the borders. And these are not necessarily supporters of the Trump previous administration. These are presidents right now that are talking about a failed border policy in this Biden administration. And listen, this is a nonpartisan issue. Everyone understands on the left and the right that this border is a gigantic crisis. The wall helped, certainly. We can utilize technology. We can certainly utilize technology.
You're shaking your head, Mark. You don't think the wall helped?
This is a very complicated, huge issue that a lot of folks care a lot about, but I think you're confusing a lot of different issues. First of all, our legal immigration system does need a considerable overhaul. I think on that we agree. On the illegal immigration issue, we are going through something of a crisis on the border, but I think that's the result of 4 years of totally failed and immoral immigration policy under President Trump. And now we're picking up the pieces and trying to put together.
What was immoral?
Well,
about
putting kids in cages wasn't a great look, was it?
That started under Obama. Do your research.
And claiming that Mexico is going to build a wall on our border, and then never building the wall, and then having the state government of Texas attempt to build a wall with private money for a PR stunt that doesn't actually do anything. Like, let's get serious. Let's have a real policy.
Would you agree, Mark, that when Donald Trump said that Mexico was going to pay for the wall, the first time you ever heard that, and you were an early Trump supporter, what did you think when he said that? Did you believe him?
No. I mean, serving in government.
Why would you?
No, well, serving in government, it's not going to have, you know that they're not going to pay for it. But I love his answers, because this is why Republicans are going to win in midterm elections, because the whole strategy is blame Trump, blame Trump. Well, he should have learned from Terry McAuliffe, he's as astute politically as he likes to talk about, because Donald Trump was not on the ballot, and Democrats lost in Virginia. They almost lost in New Jersey, and they're bracing for a wave of retirements in Congress on the Democratic side. And so every time he talks about Donald Trump and the failed policies of this administration, I love it, because this is a campaign commercial for Republicans.
Mark, is Donald Trump running for president?
Is it beating a dead horse, though, Patrick?
is beating a dead horse. Talking about Donald Trump. The putative Republican nominee for president in 2024.
Yeah.
He's still politically active. He's still endorsing. He's taking meetings
So is
at
Obama.
Mar-a-Lago.
So is Obama.
But President Trump is running for office. He's running for president. This is the leader of the Republican Party.
Where did
Okay.
you hear that
so
from?
This, in your view, then, is not yesterday's news.
No, of course not.
Donald Trump is a contemporary political figure,
right.
not just someone in the rearview mirror.
Donald Trump is the leader of the Republican Party.
Do you agree with that, Mark?
Yeah, and Barack Obama's leader of Democratic. Barack Obama's leader of the Democratic Party.
No, of
This
course
is
he is.
Obama's third term.
President Biden is the leader of the Democratic
Actually,
Party
he
because
said
he's
President
the sitting
Harris.
president of the United States.
Actually, he said President Harris just yesterday. So who is the leader of the free world?
Are you happy with the way that President Biden is operating, in your view, Patrick?
I am impressed by the professionalism and the hard work of the administration. Yes, it's been a 180
Come
for the
on,
last
man.
4 years.
Well, let's let him
Right.
finish.
President Biden has recruited and led a very accomplished team of successful folks to do a really hard job. So yeah, I'm pleased with how he's managing the administration.
How about the pullout of Afghanistan?
We've talked about this before, Bruce. The
I know
pullout of
we have.
Afghanistan was set up by Trump in the surrender agreement last year, right? So Biden was executing on a strategic situation that was already in play.
And he couldn't have changed it.
I don't think so. I think we were going to pull out of Afghanistan, particularly after we signed the deal, after President Trump signed the deal with the Taliban. We were going to pull out of Afghanistan regardless, and we did. We followed through with that.
So the talk of whether Joe Biden is going to run again in 2024, is that just a Beltway dream?
Sure.
But it gets so much ink and so much airtime.
Of course
it's not
it
going to
does.
go away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so does this kind of fabricated story about the vice president, right? These are conflicts that DC reporters use to sell papers. They're not interesting. They're not relevant. They're not substantive, and they really don't reflect on the administration.
Well, how are they not relevant to her, though? I mean, are they making these stories up about her poll numbers? Are they making these things up about that her staff has been dwindling since she took office? I mean, are these fabrications, or are these true assessments of a lack of political skills on the part of the vice president?
I would say that we're a year into the first term of a Democratic president who likely is going to run again in 3 years. And so what happens in the vice president's office at the end of that first year isn't terribly interesting when there's a pandemic going on, a massive spending plan that's now been deferred, an infrastructure spending plan that's just kicking off, and a midterm election next year.
Mark, are you pleased that the only person who gets any oxygen when discussing the future of the Republican Party is the former president who lost, impeached twice, and yet he's sucking up all the oxygen? Should that be shared with a handful of other people that would like to lead the Republican Party? And if so, how do they break out from where they are, behind the eight ball?
Well, listen, I mean, Donald Trump has not made any decision publicly, and he hasn't spoken about whether he's running or not running. It's just been a teaser so far, but my friend on the other side is convinced that Donald Trump is going to be the nominee for president when nothing's been said. No, I've been to Mar-a-Lago several times, and the president has been very coy on whether or not he's going to run again, and that's part of his demeanor. I mean, I've worked for him for two.
So why are you going
years.
to Mar-a-Lago?
Who wouldn't want to go to Mar-a-Lago? Have you been to Mar-a-lago, Bruce? It's beautiful.
No,
I
I've
would
never
not want
been
to go to
invited.
Mar-a-Lago.
It's
I would
beautiful.
go there. I've been around
resort.
the outside. It's really nice. It's nice from the outside. But my question is, when you go to Mar-a-Lago, I mean, what are you looking for?
I get invites. I go to the golf club as well in Palm Beach. I mean, I'm still close with many in the president's inner orbit. Why wouldn't you want to
But are
go?
you asking him to do something, or is he asking you to do things? By the way, we should mention for those around the country that may not have put two and two together, Mark Vargas, who does a talk show here at WIND, he's right across the hall from where we do Beyond the Beltway. He precedes me on the air every Sunday night, and this tonight I'm going to follow him on the air. But my question is, you are known because you're the guy that engineered the clemency decision by the part of the president that got Rod Blagojevich, the former governor of Illinois, out of prison. You worked the levers of power, and you were the marionette that pulled it all off. So you have some magic in your hands, Mark. So my question is, are you being asked to do other magical things with your political skills?
I won't discuss any of those things. But listen,
Why not? Are
it's
they going on,
interesting.
or you just don't want to tell about it?
I mean, there's lots of conversations going on at Mar-a-Lago and across the country, not just at Bedminster and Washington. There's conversations happening all the time. And listen, I mean, Donald Trump is a force to be reckoned with in terms of the money that he's been able to raise, incredible amounts of money. He still dominates the headlines, and contrary to what my friend here likes to talk about, I mean, a lot of bipartisan things happened in terms of criminal justice reform, which was historic, and that was with President Trump, where you had the ACLU on one side and the Koch brothers on the other, and everyone in between. I worked very closely with Jared Kushner on those, where he reversed racist policies that were put forth by Democrats, the 1994 Clinton crime bill, authored by Joe Biden, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who bragged about writing that racist piece of legislation. It was this terrible monster and racist named Donald Trump who reformed a very racist and broken criminal justice system, who's gotten incredible votes in the black community, surprised many people across the country, and in a
truth
pandemic.
to that, Patrick?
I'm pretty sure the name of the legislation that was passed was First Step, right? Because it was a first step. And hey, on the Democratic side, we were all impressed that Republicans were interested in police reform, and that's great. I'm glad in criminal justice reform. Excuse me. I'm glad that happened. Obviously, it didn't do anything to prevent the horrible police misconduct of 2020 and the resulting protests and riots. And obviously, we have a lot more to do. But sure, you get some small credit for that.
A lot of credit. Van Jones is a very dear friend of mine, a Democrat, said Republicans took the biggest issue away from Democrats, which is criminal justice reform.
Well, it's back.
When we come back, we're going to pick up on that criminal justice reform and also the raging crime wave in the country, if you believe that. I'm Bruce DuMont. Thanks for joining us tonight. Coast to coast and border to border around the world at BeyondTheBeltway.com. Live tonight from Elk Grove Village, Illinois.
Along the way is where we find the unexpected. Along the way is where we take in the scenery, and often where we have the most fun. Sure, along the way can be the place we stop to fill up or grab a bite to eat. But in Michigan, along the way becomes the place we've been longing for. Because enjoying the journey is always pure Michigan. Your trip begins at Michigan.org.
The central and midwestern U.S. averages more than 850 tornadoes each year, and lately, the number of floods has been rising in the region too. So chances are, there will be more twisters and floods near here again. And between school, sports, and social lives, chances are, you won't be with your kids when it happens. Will they know what to do? Ready.gov/kids has all the educational tools and information to make the conversation easy. When the time comes, chances are they'll feel prepared, not scared. So talk with your family today.
Bruce DuMont back, and we continue with Beyond the Beltway. Nice to have you with us, and we've got a first-time guest here this evening, although on our flagship station, he is a regular voice that you hear before Beyond the Beltway every Sunday night. Mark Vargas, tell everybody a little bit about you. Have a very distinguished resume. Give everybody kind of a summary of those accolades who are listening around the country.
Well, Bruce, thanks a lot for lowering your standards and allowing me to come in for the very first time next to Patrick here. But
now that I know you're so close, it's like you just came in early for that. That's good.
That's right. It's easy. But just real quick, September 11th, 2001 was my lightning bolt moment, and I knew at that moment I was a student at Judson University in Elgin that I wanted to serve my country, and I didn't know what that looked like. But I call it divine favor, divine intervention. Mm-hmm. Several years later, I find myself walking into the Pentagon to interview for a job to join the staff of the Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, in wartime. And I was to join a task force in Iraq. And so I was brought along. It was a White House made the recommendation, Bush White House. And so I took a total of 14 deployments to Iraq as a civilian. I was not in the military during combat from 07 to 10, served under Presidents Bush and Obama, as working as an aide in the Secretary of Defense's office. I have done a lot of consulting. I did a lot of work with Mark Cuban on his health care proposal to ensure that 27 million Americans get health insurance.
When you look back, forgive me for interrupting, but when you look back on this, is a very impressive resume. Who was the first person that opened the door? I mean, you've had a lot of doors opened for you. Who was the one that opened that first door that led to this maze of successful door openings for you?
The first one was actually the then Speaker of the House, Denny Hastert, at his office.
Okay.
They were incredibly kind to me and really got me my first start and flavor of Washington, D.C. and how that works. And here I was in college going to Washington for the summer, interning in the Speaker's office, and I'm seeing people walk into the Capitol and into the Speaker's office that I see on television. And so it was just so exciting.
So when are you going to run for office?
Well, I was a failed congressional candidate in 2010 in Illinois 14, Hastert's old seat. But, I don't have any interest right now. I
Really?
enjoy sort of playing on the perimeter.
Right now, but that doesn't mean forever.
Perhaps.
Patrick, I want to ask you the same question first. You would like to run for office someday, right?
At some point, I'd like to serve. Yes.
Give everybody your background.
Sure. So I grew up in Northbrook, Illinois. I spent about 10 years out in Washington, working mostly in Asia Pacific, going back and forth from D.C. to Hong Kong, India, and China. And then I came back to do my MBA at the University of Chicago. After that, we moved up to Winnetka, and I've been a management consultant and a businessman since. I recently left McKinsey & Company earlier this summer and work with my wife on a direct-to-consumer e-commerce company called Piglet in Bed. We sell pajamas, linens, homewares, housewares. So if you're still looking for Christmas presents, I think we can guarantee delivery by Christmas until about midnight.
Where do they go?
Where do they?
Where do they go
to
online?
head over to pigletinbed.com. Thanks, Bruce.
Okay. And again, literally they could get it out next couple of days?
Yeah, I really hope I don't get in trouble for saying that. Yes. we've got a warehouse in Northbrook.
Say it one more time.
Sure.
This is a Democrat who is a businessman.
That's exactly right. I think that's
Okay.
important. Yes. So we've got a warehouse in Northbrook full of workers who are working hard.
Are they elves? Are they union workers?
They are not unionized yet.
Okay, let's take a call from Radio Land. John is listening to us in McHenry, Illinois. John, if you're there, speak up loud and clear.
All right. Merry Christmas, all.
Thank you.
Christmas came early for us with Joe Manchin today
Yes,
when he
yes.
torpedoed the Build Back Better plan. I have to point to everybody. He put in writing to Chuck Schumer at the end of July what his conditions were on Build Back Better, or what became known as Build Back Better. Him and Senate Majority Leader Schumer signed this, and at the very bottom it says, first off, the revenue, nothing exceeding $1.5 trillion. That was his number. So anything above $1.5 trillion, Manchin was not going to commit to. And at the very bottom, he said, Senator Manchin does not guarantee that he will vote for the final reconciliation legislation if it exceeds the conditions outlined in this agreement. One of the other conditions is no expansions of entitlements without means testing.
Right.
So just want to comment that Manchin said through to his word. He said it in writing. I mean, reading the responses on Twitter, it's like reading the Sunday Funny papers, and even Jen Psaki's long-winded statement from the White House. Manchin's going by this Congressional Budget Office that said the real cost of the legislation. So we're very thankful that Joe Manchin came through and he held to his convictions, and he made it very clear almost 5 months ago what he was looking for in the legislation. And this is someone who actually held to his word, and he put it in writing. It went public back at the end of September, and I just want to comment that and see what your panelists say to what he put back in July, and the fact that he followed through with it today and made it clear he will not vote for what passed the House.
Patrick.
Yeah,
Hanley.
yeah, John, I think that's a really good point. Listen, I hear that, and I personally think that he's going to get coal in his stocking this year, but he'd probably be happy with that. The reality is
He
There was
gets
there was
cold in his
5
stocking
months.
wherever he goes. There's lots of coal.
That's exactly right. There's 5 months of negotiations. Right back in October, November, he said he's comfortable with the 1.75 trillion. There was a handshake deal with Biden in December. So folks on my side get frustrated when we see Senator Manchin, what I would say is leading us on for about half a year around these issues, especially when we came through with the infrastructure plan. So, I'm frustrated, but I do hear you, John. It would be out of character for Senator Manchin to agree to this level of spending this quickly. And the reality is now the Build Back Better policies, which are wildly popular, are on the ballot in November.
Mark, your comment.
Well, President Joe Manchin has spoken. And, at the end of the day, I think, Joe Biden was wishing everybody happy 4th of July as the Senate recessed for Christmas break. Listen, at the end of the day, Joe Manchin's a good man. A lot of people say on the left and the right, he's a good man, and he's doing what politicians should do. He made a tough decision, and you got to respect that. But Schumer and the Democrats in the White House have to be very careful because they have a very slim majority in the Senate. Very, very slim majority. And they are really going to be pushing Joe Biden to make, or President Joe Manchin to make decision to caucus with the Republicans. And that's going to really change the shift of the Senate. They've got to tread carefully. They've been attacking him all day long, and I don't think that just bodes well for the Democrats.
John, I want to follow up with a question based on what you've just said, because there have been numerous runs at Joe Manchin by the Republican Party over the years to switch parties, not just in this recent celebrityhood that he's in for the last 8 or 9 months. I want to ask you this question, Mark. Does Joe Manchin represent a potential opportunity for the Republican Party if it ever became apparent that Donald Trump could not or would not run for president? Let's say, God forbid, there's a health issue. So Donald Trump is out of the picture for 2024. And you look at Joe Manchin as a political commodity. Is there anyone that jumps to the top of your brain right now as a Republican who could bring to a national election the things that Joe Manchin has already earned because of the billions of dollars in free publicity he's received as the guy standing in the congressional door?
Sure. I like Joe Manchin, and he'd certainly be a contender for 2024, even as a vice presidential candidate on the Republican side. Sure, absolutely.
What do you think of that idea, Patrick?
Oh, I don't know that those things work out very well. It always seems like a good idea for folks like Joe Lieberman or others to swap sides, but I really don't think voters reward that.
They do, in other words, a Republican primary voter or an independent voter, notwithstanding even some Democrats from West Virginia, you don't believe there is any constituency out there that looks at what Joe Manchin is doing and applauding that?
No, I really don't. Outside of Democrats in West Virginia, no. No, I don't see it.
I
And
think
Republicans in West Virginia.
I'm kind of surprised at that statement because
Really?
I would think that all the publicity that he's received, there's probably a lot of independents and Republicans are saying, this guy he's standing up. He's saying the right words, and by golly, I wouldn't vote for him now because he's a Democrat. But what if he were to emerge and change parties and emerge as a Republican, as a candidate for president? He's not going to challenge Joe Biden. He has no future in the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Mark, have we started a plan here? Is this a conspiracy of
I
two
think
here?
no. I think we've started a plan. I'll just suggest that my friend just stay in his e-commerce business and let the national
There you go.
politicking up to us. Leave that up to us.
John, thanks very much. We appreciate your call. Let's go to Edward. He is listening to us this evening on AM 560, our flagship station. Go ahead, Edward from Chicago.
Yeah, good evening. Mr. Biden on Tuesday needs to address one of the things is the blood clots that are happening in Johnson & Johnson. So people don't have any hesitancy about getting Pfizer or Moderna.
Okay, well, I'm sure, I don't think he's going to address that in his speech, but I'm sure that the FDA is looking into some of the questions about Johnson & Johnson, and the efficiency of their vaccine. Okay, thanks very much. Let's go to Tom. Actually, we're going to go to Tom after the break because the music is playing. He's in Youngstown, Ohio. He's standing by, and we will hear his dulcet tones in a moment. 1-800-723-8229 from coast to coast and border to border and beyondthebeltway.com.
Meet George Jetson. His boy Elroy.
With instant acceleration, electric cars are more fun to drive and more affordable than ever. Electric cars are here. Plug in to the present.
Bruce DuMont back, and I promised that we would be heading east to Youngstown, Ohio. And Tom is there listening on WPIC. Go ahead, you're on the air.
Merry Christmas to all of you.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you, Tom.
Two corrections or clarifications. First
Yes.
of all, as far as the border wall is concerned, what Trump was saying is that for decades, Mexico was shifting the cost of social costs and economic costs of their poor to our country, as well as the people coming up from Central America. By building the wall, that cost shifts back to Mexico. The money saved from that pays for the wall. Mexico indirectly would pay for it. As far as the situation with Afghanistan, Trump did have a timeline, but he was going to be flexible on that. He already shifted it once. Biden, on the other hand, focused on political correctness in the military instead of realizing that first you take out the hostages and the civilians and the people that cooperated with you, and you take out your military arsenal and scale that down, and then eventually you pull out the military. You don't just pull out the military first and leave everything else behind, including all the documents of who aided us and who they were and where they were, and those people are now being murdered.
Mm-hmm. When you look ahead, Tom, you call this program frequently, and I'm going to suggest that you're probably a fan of Donald Trump, but I don't know that as a fact.
You're absolutely right, Chris.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And my question to you is, if for some reason Donald Trump were not able to make it to the post, for whatever reason, I mean, he's a man that's advancing in years. He looks pretty good. Health is allegedly good. But, you know, there's always the great health issue. If something were to come up, who is your backup choice for president or running for president?
I don't have a backup choice.
Would Joe Manchin be a backup choice?
I see Trump, and you know, the people that are Trump-like are only emulating what Trump has done. In a given situation, Trump is unpredictable, and he innovates, and that's what makes Trump Trump. And he succeeds in doing so. He has this instinct to do so. So for you ask me, Bruce, who I would pick, you know, I mean, you know, who would you pick besides Secretariat if Secretariat couldn't win a race, a horse race? You know, you pick that thoroughbred because that's the one that's won the races.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
but you can't say that the next in line would be this one.
Tom,
I'd have to wait and see who's available.
Yeah, Tom, I think that's so interesting. I really appreciate your response, and it just makes me curious. What is that the one thing that you really draws you to President Trump? Is kind of the unpredictability, the innovation? Is that what you like about it?
It was the willingness to go for the jugular, and at the same time the fire in the belly. Mm-hmm. You know, I first of all, I was a Democrat most of my life. I didn't leave the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party left me. Mm-hmm. Now I looked at. I actually voted for McCain and Romney. They were both presidential, but they were both losers. Same with Bob Dole. Mm-hmm. Trump was willing to be different. He was willing to say things the way they were and take the hits, but be honest about it. And I think that's what drew a lot of people to him. Yeah. He wasn't dodging. He was presidential in the sense of a Teddy Roosevelt or of a Harry Truman or someone like that. Or Andrew Jackson. He wasn't presidential in the sense of the wishy-washiness that we've seen recently in years. And then the Jimmy Carters. I'm sorry, Jimmy Carter, nice guy, lousy president. I voted for him twice, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you've summarized the appeal of Donald Trump, and I guess a question that I would ask is, if you voted against Donald Trump for re-election, based on what you know now and based on what you're experiencing with the Democrat president and Joe Biden, would you go back to Donald Trump? I mean, there was quite a drop-off of voters from Donald Trump who, they voted for him the first time. They didn't vote for him the second time. Not a huge number, but enough to kick him out of office. I'm wondering how many of those people have buyer's remorse that they voted for Joe Biden, and by golly, we're going to go back. We're going to give Donald Trump a second chance. Mark.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those that he lost the second time is a lot of these, the moms, the suburban moms. But because of the crime and law and order issues, we're seeing this crime now go from big cities into the suburbs. This is a big issue. And so I think this is a perfect opportunity to bring Donald Trump in. Listen, the caller described this Donald Trump to a T. I mean, there are so many Democrats now that are kind of shifting towards center right now because same comment. I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. I can't tell you how many times I hear that. And all of your callers and all of your listeners, whether they're Republican or Democrat, during the last 4 years of Donald Trump's presidency, they had more money in their pockets than they have in a long, long time. And that's true. The lowest unemployment rates for women, for minorities in 50-plus years.
Let's go to another call. Brian is listening to us in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Go ahead, Albuquerque.
Hey, happy holidays, Bruce.
Happy holidays, Brian.
I used to be Brian from Roselle. Now I'm Brian from Albuquerque.
Wow, well, it's probably a lot warmer out there now.
It was about 20 degrees warmer than Elgin or Elk Grove today. I want to make a few comments. I don't like either party. I'm an independent, and that's not out of ignorance because I know what they do. Donald Trump's the perfect candidate for people with short attention spans because he's on every side of every issue if you listen to everything he says. Would anybody like to comment on what Donald had to say about people that take the Fifth Amendment? Did you catch any of that? And then
Mark,
I'd also
let Mark respond to
that.
that. Mark, you want to respond to that?
Listen, I mean, at the end of the day, he's not a politician. He's a business guy, and he came at it from that perspective. I can hear my colleague over here sighing, but it's true. And, of course, you can nitpick what he said before and now, and I mean, everyone's got that. There's not one single person in public office that hasn't flipped on something.
But by no means to that extent, right? Trump's relationship with the truth is pretty unprecedented.
Let's talk about Joe Biden and the pandemic.
Should Mark Meadows serve prison time for failing to testify?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Do you think he should?
Of course.
I suggested to Mark Meadows to change his name to Hunter Biden, then they'd leave him alone.
What do you think of that?
Can I make some comments on the Democrats?
Yeah, yes, go ahead. He's here.
Yeah, I'm a union man. I'm a lucky guy.
On that point that you're a union man, if you can stand by, we'll let you start the second hour, but we're going to a break. We have to say farewell to Mark Vargas because he has a program to do. And again, when we come back, Judith Sherwin will join us, and Patrick Hanley will continue. I'm Bruce DuMont. Don't go away.
Roll over. Chance high five. All right.
When you adopt a shelter pet, you discover all the things that make them unique.
And your mother and...
I am totally a hot person. Right, guys? Thanks for being honest. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org.
Not wearing a mask in public is like not wearing a seatbelt because no one else is. Or not wearing a life jacket because it's uncomfortable.
Or not wearing a helmet because it's just one play.
Or not putting me in a car seat because we're only going down the block.
A mask is like anything that keeps us safe. It only works if you wear it.
So wear a mask when you're out in public, because we're all safer and stronger when we go all in, Illinois.